Be me, Drew, 31, sysadmin at a mid-size SaaS. Not a hacker, not a prodigy, just the guy who makes the boring parts stay boring. Patch servers, rotate certs, reset passwords, untangle printers like they're cursed spaghetti. Daily life is tickets, coffee, and praying. Nobody discovers the ancient Windows box under the stairs. Our IT corner used to be quiet, like a basement workshop the rest of the building forgets exists. 9 guys, 2 server closets, 1 shared trauma called the VPN that dies every storm. Work culture was simple. Do the job, don't make drama, go home with your sanity intact. Jokes were dumb, opinions were louder than our keyboards, but the system stayed up. Frank ran the place, 63, grumpy in the way that means competent, coasting toward retirement. Frank believed in one philosophy: fix problems fast and talk about feelings never. He let us run free as long as dashboard stayed green and clients stayed quiet. Late spring arrives. Frank announces retirement like he's reading a grocery list. Sheet cake appears. Everyone signs a card with the same sentence about enjoying the next chapter. Frank shakes hands, tells Gabe to keep backups tested, and walks out without a speech. Expectation in the air says Gabe gets promoted because Gabe already does the job anyway. Gabe is 58, built like a forklift, soft voice, terrifying focus, makes vendors sweat with silence. Instead, we get a calendar invite titled IT Cultural Reset, Mandatory Attendance. Meeting room smells like dry markers and HR ambition, chairs arranged in a circle like a support group. Door opens and in steps Camille, mid-30s, bright blazer, perfect hair, new MacBook held like a trophy. First impression screams LinkedIn. Second impression screams she's never racked a server in her life. Introduction lands with a smile. Head of Systems Culture and Operational Harmony. Eyes around the circle exchange the same message: we are so cooked. Questions about uptime never appear. Backlog never appears. Security never appears. Camille starts with energy, space, and the emotional footprint of urgency-driven tech behavior. She says our department has been functioning, and functioning is not the same as flourishing. Slide deck appears with a title, De-escalation through language and intent. Another slide says, masculine urgency patterns can create unsafe microdynamics. Gabe stares at a fixed point on the wall like he's trying to exit through drywall. Kyle, 23, fresh grad, tries not to laugh and fails quietly in his nose. Camille talks for 40 minutes and never once says server, router, firewall, or backup. Buzzwords fly like mosquitoes: optics, synergy, unpacking, stakeholder care, relational support posture. The word stakeholder gets used so often it starts sounding like a threat. Camille announces weekly check-ins for emotional transparency and collaborative belonging. Camille announces a communication safety protocol, effective immediately, because tone is infrastructure. She says this is not censorship, it's kindness with structure and intentional boundaries. Frank never said kindness in 20 years, but he was kinder than this already. Meeting ends with Camille asking each of us to set an intention for the quarter. Gabe sets an intention to keep the SAN alive, and Camille writes it down like it's poetry. First week becomes a whirlwind of harmless changes that still somehow hurt. Soft lighting gets installed in the server closet, making labels unreadable unless you bring a flashlight. Old coffee machine gets replaced with pods that taste like wet cardboard and break twice a day. Calendar fills with alignment circle every Monday, plus culture debrief after any outage. Camille asks us to share one gratitude and one growth edge like we're a therapy cohort. Kyle says his gratitude is that meetings have an end, and Camille frowns like he kicked a puppy. Gabe says his growth edge is tolerating meetings, and Camille beams like she discovered leadership. Tickets still get done, but now work happens under a fog of talk that produces no output. We adapt, because tech people can adapt to anything except being forced to smile about it. Month 1 ends with the real hammer dropping via email at 6:04 p.m. on a Tuesday. Subject line screams corporate menace. Updated communication standards for safer collaboration. Message opens with in service of inclusion and psychological safety, which is never a good sign. Policy bans dominance-coded phrases that trigger urgency dynamics and fear-based compliance. Words like urgent, critical, emergency, and ASAP are now prohibited in IT communications. Phrases like fix it now, this is wrong, and I need you to do this are labeled hierarchical harm. Interruption is banned even during incidents because interruption is a micro-override. Overly certain language is discouraged because certainty can weaponize expertise. Every incident response must begin with collective emotional acknowledgement before technical action. HR is CCD, which turns a weird suggestion into a rule with teeth. Silence settles over our desks as the email gets read line by line. Kyle types in chat, "Is please still allowed? Or is that also coercive now?" Marco asks if reboot counts as violent imagery because it sounds like crushing something. Gabe asks if down is too negative because it frames the system as a failure. My brain tries to quit and file a resignation letter on my behalf. We decide to request clarification because vague rules are traps disguised as compassion. Short straw lands on me because I can speak without sounding sarcastic usually. Knock on Camille's door, hear a cheerful "come in," like entering a wellness spa. Request for concrete examples comes out polite and professional because I like paying rent. Camille smiles and says checklists are oppressive. Intent matters more than rigid lists. Question about payroll being down gets answered with name impact gently and invite support. Follow-up about saying service down gets answered with accuracy plus energetic awareness. Camille tells me to trust my emotional intelligence and be an ally to safer language. Conversation ends with me leaving empty-handed, carrying only irritation and a new headache. Week of forced compliance begins, and the office becomes a museum of awkward phrasing. Simple ticket replies turn into 3-paragraph poems about collaboration and shared journeys. Password reset messages apologize for the burden of remembering and the shame of forgetting. Printer jams become paper experiencing resistance that invites gentle guidance. Camille strolls by, reads our replies, and nods like she's watching students learn empathy. She says she feels safer in our space now, and the word space starts making my eye twitch. First real incident arrives on a quiet Tuesday because the universe enjoys comedic timing. App server stops responding, monitors flash, pager buzzes, normal life would start here. New life begins with Gabe typing, noticing a temporary digital silence event on Node 3. Kyle replies, "Thank you for holding space for Node 3's current rest experience." Marco adds, "I will softly trace routing feelings in the north segment before intervention." Laughter stays trapped behind our teeth because we're in an open office with cameras and witnesses. Camille appears, sees the incident chat, and congratulates our compassionate response posture. She schedules an emotional debrief about the reboot, and the debrief lasts longer than the outage. Something sharp clicks in my head during that debrief, like a key turning in a lock. Rules are written, HR endorsed them, and Camille loves obedience more than outcomes. Perfect compliance is the safest weapon because nobody can punish you for following policy. Malicious compliance isn't rebellion, it's management getting exactly what they asked for. After hours meeting happens at our desk with monitors as the only light. Plan gets built like a heist. No shouting, no insults, just flawless, sugary obedience. Shared document appears titled Safe Language Templates, and Kyle names the file like a villain. Templates include substitutions, urgent becomes time-sensitive experience, critical becomes highly noticed moment. This is wrong becomes I hold a different perspective on this implementation pathway. Fix it now becomes I invite us to prioritize this if we collectively feel ready to proceed. We agree to never use banned words again, not once, not even when someone deserves it. Next morning starts normal, except every sentence becomes a velvet glove hiding a brick. Ticket from accounting arrives saying payroll system is down and they need it now. Reply goes out, I'm noticing an availability transition in payroll that may feel destabilizing. Accountant responds, is it down or not? And we answer with 3 lines of gentle ambiguity. Camille praises the tone, says we are modeling safer tech leadership, and my soul leaves my body briefly. Monitoring page gets updated because red banners create panic framing in shared spaces. Alert severity colors become neutral grays and soft blues like a meditation app. Critical becomes highly noticed experience and warning, becomes gentle attention request. Email alerts start reading like therapy prompts, and nobody knows what is actually on fire anymore. Automation gets rewritten because Camille says bots can also replicate harmful urgency dynamics. Auto reply now begins with, "Thank you for staying present with us," before any useful info appears. Language spreads like a virus the moment other departments see our ticket replies. Marketing analyst screenshots a response about her laptop exploring REST identity and posts it to company chat. Reaction emojis explode, and the phrase "holding space" becomes office slang by lunchtime. Sales starts opening calls with, "Thank you for holding space for our partnership journey." Customer success tells a client, "We are gently realigning expectations with your lived experience." Finance emails a payment reminder and signs off with "softly," like it's a threat disguised as kindness. Camille interprets all of this as cultural victory instead of the mockery it obviously is. New handbook drops called Language Hygiene for Technical Safety, printed glossy like a cult pamphlet. Glossary inside replaces outage with service rest, incident with learning moment, escalation with care ladder. Camille asks us to add a soft preface to every status update so stakeholders feel accompanied. Status page now starts with, "We appreciate your patience as we navigate this transition together." People outside IT begin parodying the tone in their own messages to each other. Product team writes, "Feature is taking time to emerge authentically," when they miss a deadline. QA reports bugs like diary entries. "Today the button expressed refusal to be clicked." Legal pings asking why a security alert said, "Identity exploration event in authentication." Reply goes out describing the auth system's growth journey, and legal stops asking follow-ups. Camille adds another rule: confident statements must be labeled as personal perspective. Messages become, in my lived experience, the service appears to be unavailable at this time. Kyle makes a Slack shortcut for that phrase, and we start using it like punctuation. Meeting culture mutates because Camille insists incident response must model emotional alignment. Monday alignment circles get longer because every person has to share without interruption. Gabe tries to keep it short, but Camille asks him to unpack what urgency means to his inner narrative. Marco starts bringing a notebook just to doodle while Camille says the word paradigm. Kyle looks like he's aged 5 years since graduation, which is impressive and tragic. Small outage happens in Wi-Fi and Camille demands a breathing moment before we touch hardware. Sales reps stand in the hallway staring at dead laptops like lost tourists. Wi-Fi gets fixed fast anyway, but we still write a post-mortem about network boundaries and self-care. Camille claps in the debrief and says, "This is resilience. And I wonder if I'm in a prank show." Complaints arrive from other teams saying our ticket replies are confusing and time-wasting. Camille responds that confusion is part of growth, and clarity can be a dominance tool. HR forwards that response, which means HR is complicit, which means our trap has a perfect paper trail. 2 weeks pass and the entire building speaks in soft nonsense like it's company dialect now. Even the CEO gets a message from marketing saying, holding space for Q3 targets, and the CEO replies, LOL. Camille sees the CEO reply and believes it's endorsement, because optimism is a dangerous drug. Calm Thursday afternoon arrives, and the universe finally cashes in the joke. Major client reports payment integration timing out, the kind of issue that buys executives instant attention. Client is a giant logistics operator with contract clauses sharper than knives. Incident channel floods, phones buzz, monitoring page shows a calm gray ocean of noticed experiences. Normal world would start with critical outage, but that phrase is banned, so we begin the theater. Gabe types, I am noticing elevated latency feelings in the payment pathway. Marco types, I will softly trace packets as they express uncertainty between regions. Kyle types, I invite us to approach the database with compassion and steady breath. Protocol says leadership must be emotionally acknowledged before intervention, so Camille gets pinged immediately. Camille joins the Zoom with a smile like she's happy to be included in an emergency she refuses to name. First words out of her mouth ask for emotional alignment, so we don't replicate urgency harm. Request from Gabe to act fast gets reframed by Camille as panic framing and hierarchical command energy. Camille invites Gabe to name impact gently, so he says stakeholders feel destabilized by revenue flow pauses. Camille nods and asks each responder to share one feeling before any technical action begins. Marco says curious, Kyle says tender, I say focused, and Gabe says desperate to fix the outage. Camille thanks Gabe and gently corrects his wording, suggesting he replace desperate with present. Camille asks if anyone feels unready for intervention, because forcing action can cause harm. Kyle, absolute menace, says he feels anxious about reboot energy today and wants to be supported. Camille praises Kyle for courage and insists we must honor that truth before touching systems. Breathing exercise begins while the outage timer climbs like a rocket. 5 minutes pass, then 8, because Camille wants to ensure Kyle feels included and not overridden. Client escalates to account management, then to leadership, then to the CEO's assistant, like dominoes falling. Camille replies to the CEO's assistant with a template about holding space for urgent feelings. CEO joins the Zoom, followed by the COO, both wearing the facial expression of people losing money in real time. CEO asks why the platform is still down and why nothing seems to be happening. Camille explains we are practicing psychologically safe incident response to avoid urgency-coded harm. COO says he doesn't care about vibes. He cares about the client leaving or staying today. Camille says that tone is a micro-override and invites the COO to rephrase without dominance. COO goes silent so hard it sounds like a threat, then mutes himself before he commits a career-ending sentence. I speak carefully because interruption is banned, but silence would be worse for everyone's paycheck. I say we are following the approved escalation framework as written and can show the document. Screen share pops up with Camille's PDF, complete with version history and HR approval chain. Section highlighted says collective emotional acknowledgement must occur before technical intervention. CEO reads it slowly like he's tasting poison through his eyes. COO unmutes and asks who wrote this, and Camille proudly says she did, for inclusive operations and safety. CEO asks if this policy caused the 12-minute delay, and I say yes precisely without emotion. Camille claims delays are investments in trust and long-term culture health. COO says the client's contract is an investment too, and it's currently dying on the floor. CEO instructs us to fix it immediately using non-banned words, which is the funniest executive skill check ever. Camille asks Kyle if he is ready now, because readiness matters and overriding is harmful. Kyle says he still feels tender but is willing to witness a reboot if we proceed gently. Gabe finally gets permission to do his real job and begins the actual technical steps. Rollback happens, worker pool restarts, database connection resets, firewall rules verified, logs checked. 4 minutes later, payments resume. Graphs turn honest again, and the client's screaming stops. Executives do not calm down, because executives remember embarrassment like elephants remember faces. CEO ends the incident call and asks Camille and HR leadership to meet in the boardroom in 1 hour. Invite hits my inbox, too, as incident documentation witness, which sounds like a court summons. Boardroom sits on the top floor with expensive chairs that actively punish your spine. COO sits at the head of the table. HR director sits beside him with that famous dead HR smile. Camille arrives confident, posture straight, smile practiced, as if she expects praise for safer outcomes. Request from COO is simple: timeline, facts, decisions, and reasons for delays. I speak like a machine because machines don't get accused of tone violations. I describe policy, banned language, required alignment, Kyle's unready moment, breathing exercise, delayed action. I show email chain where we asked for clarity and Camille answered with intent, energy, and emotional intelligence. I show HR response empowering Camille to implement standards she felt supported safety and inclusion. Camille claims we sabotaged her initiative with passive aggression and performative softness. COO raises a hand and tells her not to interrupt, which is ironic in multiple dimensions. Question from COO asks whether the policy improved uptime, response time, or client confidence. Camille says those are masculine success metrics, and the room temperature drops 10 degrees instantly. HR director looks like her soul is trying to crawl out of her body and escape through the carpet. COO points at the incident duration and asks why an outage required a meditation segment. Camille says emotional alignment prevents harm and builds long-term trust in the team. COO says nearly losing a seven-figure client is harm too, and it harms the entire company's stability. COO asks me directly whether we violated any rule, and I say no. We complied perfectly. Camille says we weaponized compliance, and COO says she weaponized policy without understanding operations. COO asks HR why risk mitigation approved an unenforceable framework that turned outage response into theater. HR tries to answer in brochure language, but COO keeps demanding plain English and direct accountability. COO states the communication policy is rescinded effective immediately across all departments. Camille argues rescinding it silences vulnerable voices and re-entrenches harmful urgency patterns. COO responds that rescinding it allows engineers to say critical when something is actually critical. Silence hangs heavy, the kind that makes you hear fluorescent lights humming in judgment. COO turns to Camille and states her employment is terminated effective today. No transition, no grace period. Camille's smile breaks, then returns weaker, like a cracked screen pretending it's fine. Camille says this is retaliation against transformative leadership and culture work. COO says it is consequences for risking revenue and reputation with a policy experiment. Security gets called. HR slides a folder across the table like they rehearsed this yesterday. Camille stands, gathers her laptop, and walks out in heels that sound loud in that room of silent adults. Elevator ride down feels longer than any outage because endings always do. Back at our desks, Gabe reads my face and understands without needing words. Kyle asks if urgent is allowed again, and I say yes, with the first honest smile in weeks. Marco changes alert colors back to red and says red is not aggressive, red is truthful. Monday alignment circle invite disappears from calendars like it never existed in the first place. New interim manager arrives from operations, asks about backups, access reviews, and ticket backlog, then leaves us alone. Office meme survives because humans love repeating nonsense once it becomes shared language. Marketing still jokes about holding space. Sales still says softly before deadlines, and nobody writes handbooks anymore. Gabe mutters that he's seen stranger things, then admits this one was top 5. Camille is gone, the policy is dead, and the IT corner returns to quiet, boring stability. Lesson sticks in my head, not about politics, but about managers who confuse control with care. And it's how our department obeyed a rule so perfectly that the rule's author got fired for it.